Good afternoon. My name's Jordan Rosen. I'm a tax director at Belfin Lyons and Schuman. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about high-level multidisciplinary teaming in client advisory services. I'd like to talk about what is a high-level team? What are the characteristics of multidisciplinary teaming? What are the advantages to the client? What are the advantages to the team? How does it work? What are some of the characteristics of a high-level multidisciplinary team? What are some of the problems that the team can run into? And also, what is the process for working with the client? The first thing to keep in mind is that a multidisciplinary team approach is always client-centric. The client has to be the main focus of the team, not the individual team member. So remember who we're playing for and who we are working for. It's always the client. A high-level multidisciplinary team is when two or more advisors work together to design, recommend, and implement a specific strategy. Some of the examples that I'd like to use of situations where multidisciplinary teaming works best are in estate planning, retirement planning, education planning, portfolio management, a transaction such as the sale of a client's business, maybe achieving philanthropic or charitable requests or charitable goals of the client, and maybe something that seems very mundane, such as talking about a Roth conversion. These are just a few examples of situations with a client where multidisciplinary teaming works best. The next question that we need to ask is, who should we consider bringing to the table? What makes up the team? Well, first and foremost, if multidisciplinary teaming is all about the client is the first person on the team, and they need to be at the table. But what about other family members? Now, this can work both ways. In my opinion, in most situations, we don't want to have too many, if any, other family members at the initial meetings, because we want to hear what the client wants to do, what their intentions are, what their vision is, what brings them to the table, why do they need to plan. And we don't want that swayed by other family members who may have other interests that go in a different direction. However, at some point during the planning process, it may be a good idea to bring other family members into the mix, such as their adult children. And the reason is, after the initial plan has been put together, if we bring the adult children or other family members to the meeting and bring them to the table, the client can explain what their intentions are. Again, talking about estate planning or philanthropy. And maybe the other family members might have some questions or some insights that the client has not thought about. What you don't want to do is not bring the other family members in until after the plan has been finalized, because then it could be a big surprise for other family members, especially children. And in some cases, it may be too late after the ink is dried on the documents to alter the plan, or at least make it more difficult to make the changes. So there's an appropriate place to bring other family members into the mix. But initially, I try to discourage having other family members at the table for the initial meetings. So outside of the client, who else should we invite to the table? Well, maybe we need an attorney, a CPA, a financial planner, a wealth advisor, the insurance professional, an endowment professional if charitable giving is on the table, and other advisors that you or the client deem necessary to be a part of the team in advising clients. What are the benefits of collaboration? Well, for the client, I've listed three. First, I think collaboration allows for better advice for the client overall. There's less chance of something being overlooked, because the old saying, 3 sets of eyes are better than one. Arguably, it's also less expensive because there's less back and forth calls and meetings, because the different advisors are working together, not working separately. So I'm not working separately with my client, who then has to go and talk to their attorney about what I told them, who has to go to the investment advisor to repeat the story. With multidisciplinary teaming, the group of advisors works together. And there's also more confidence to act on behalf of the client. The client is more confident in taking the next step and implementing the plan, since the advice is coming from a team. They have confidence because they know the attorney and the CPA and the financial planner or the insurance professional have all talked together, and there is a consensus as to the plan of action. For the advisor, collaboration will result in giving better advice and avoiding embarrassing mistakes. Again, 2 sets of eyes, 3 sets of eyes are better than one. Maybe with just one advisor, that advisor may be overlooking a legal implication or a tax implication that, had they brought the attorney or the CPA into the mix and made them part of the team, that error or oversight could be avoided. Also, for the advisor, it also creates a better network of referrals. In other words, I start working with certain attorneys or insurance professionals or investment advisors, and we become comfortable with one another. We're probably going to start referring business to each other because we have created confidence in each other's abilities to work together, and we've proven ourselves to the other professionals as being competent. Now, there are some advisors that do hesitate to collaborate. We run into this all of the time. Mainly, as my first bullet point brings out, it just seems natural to plow through themselves to answer the client's question. Client calls you up or calls this particular advisor up, has the question, maybe it's about, should I do a Roth conversion? And the CPA or the investment advisor just plows through everything that they know. They don't need anyone else's input on this. And it's just easier for them to give the client the quick answer and just work with the client without bringing anyone else into the mix. The risk here is incomplete or incorrect advice being given to the client. Maybe the investment advisor hasn't considered all of the tax implications for the client if the Roth, by doing a Roth conversion, because they may not know the client's entire tax picture. Bringing others into the mix could also expose an advisor's weakness in front of others, and that's a big fear, that maybe a small practitioner that doesn't have an expertise in particular areas such as estate planning or planning for trust or the various options for planned charitable giving, they may not be up on the latest techniques and rules, and by bringing someone else in the mix, they're feeling that they could expose themselves in front of their clients to the weakness that they have and potentially lose the client. But in my opinion, an astute advisor will bring together a team to produce the best result for the client. So if a client calls me and it's not an area that I'm an expert in, maybe in insurance planning, having the right insurance product for the client as part of their estate plan, it behooves me, and it's in the best interest of the client, for me to bring an insurance professional to the table. And it's not embarrassing me, it's just showing my client that maybe I don't have the expertise, but I have the connections and can bring someone onto the team that does have the expertise in that area. So let's move on. What are the traits of a high-level team in multidisciplinary teaming and collaborative efforts? And it's, as I say here, it's much more than just coordinating communication and the sharing of documents. That's very easy. Some of the key traits include understanding your role and your responsibility. Each team member has to understand what their role is as part of the team and what their responsibilities are. It's no different than a sports team. The pitcher knows what their responsibility and their role is. The defensive end in football knows what their role and responsibilities are. Each team member has to do the same in each client's situation. They have to be able to execute their responsibilities with utmost diligence, which means that they need to understand the client's situation. And if they don't fully understand the rules, they need to bring themselves up to speed or consult with one of the other advisors in areas that they might not be up to speed on. It's very important that each team member also respect and be open to the contributions of other advisors. What do I mean by this? First, each member of the team needs to be sensitive for how the others do business. I use as an example fee structures. Attorneys and CPAs generally either charge on an hourly basis or they may have a fixed fee for doing an estate plan or running certain financial planning calculations, where an insurance professional is paid generally based on a commission basis. So we have to respect how each of the other professionals at the table are making their living and respect that during the process. So when the insurance professional is pushing, I use that in the most respectful way, a certain insurance product or an insurance technique, we have to be sensitive of how they are being paid. And if we are going to say, no, that is not the right product or what we were thinking about, we have to understand why it is that they are suggesting a particular insurance product and be sensitive to how they are making their living. We also have to be able to speak frankly and honestly and with discretion and respect to other professionals. If we see one of the other members of the team may not be giving the best advice or going down the wrong track, we don't want to say something necessarily in front of the client that will embarrass the other professional. Maybe sort of off the record, outside of the meeting, we take that other professional aside and we address our concerns. So, but we have to be honest. We have to be able to say, look, I don't necessarily agree with, your approach to this situation. Have you considered this alternative? Or maybe there's a ruling that came out which negates the advice that one of the other professionals is giving. You want to be careful how you bring that up in front of the client and maybe talk to that other professional outside of the client meeting. And on the other side of the coin, we need to give and share the credit. Just because we may have brought the most wonderful idea to the table, others are involved in implementing the plan. So we have to be able to share the credit for implementing the plan and not, as we like to say, not hogging all the credit. We want to also be aware of the other advisors' professional and ethical requirements and limitations. We don't want to ask or even take on ourselves things that we're not qualified to do. Obviously, as a CPA, I can't draft documents. I'm also not the best person to analyze the best insurance vehicles or the best insurance products. I leave that to the people that do that for a living. So it's also important to understand where others have limitations and where you need to step in, but it's also important to understand what your own limitations are. Now, I can speak as a CPA, and all of our engagements, we use an engagement letter with our clients, and we have the client sign the engagement letter before we start work with the client. Now, it's very important in these situations, and I'll use estate planning as an example, that we will spell out in our engagement letters not just what we are going to do for the client, but also what we are not going to do for the client. So there is no misunderstanding and there's no expectation gap between ourselves and the client. And that way we know exactly what we are going to do for the client knows exactly what we are going to do for them and what we are not going to do for them. And we also, the last point is something that we run into every once in a while. How do you deal with other advisors that are part of the team that don't play well in the sandbox. They want to do everything themselves. They want to control the entire situation. Sometimes you'll see this if you were brought into a client situation where this was not your client to begin with, that the other professional may have been dealing with the client for 20 years and may just want to control the entire situation. It's a very sensitive issue. You don't want to insult the other professional, but by the same token, you don't want to be in a position where others are not doing their job or controlling the situation so much that you're not able to do your job and they're not listening to your advice when you think they should be. And these are situations where you may want to, try to avoid, or you may have to back out of the engagement. So what role does everyone play on this team? And first, we talk about the client. The client's the captain of the team. It's the client who needs to approve who is on the team. What current relationships do they have with existing advisors? Do they already have an attorney, a CPA, a financial planner, an investment advisor, if those are the proper team members for this particular project? Or being a CPA, if they don't have an attorney or a financial advisor, an investment advisor, who brings them to the table? If I can recommend an attorney to execute an estate plan, I will recommend it to the client, and the client's going to have to interview that attorney or that financial planner or that insurance planner and approve them for being on the team. Also, in many cases, the client already has multiple advisors, and bringing them together for the first time, this is the first time that you're going to be working with all the other of the client's advisors that you may not have worked with in the past. But again, the client is the central focal point and has to approve everyone that is on the team. So of all these advisors, who's the leader? We can't all be leaders. We're all good at what we do, but someone has to take charge. Usually it's the existing trusted advisor who will act in that role. However, I think that experience and expertise should dictate. So if I have a client that has a complicated insurance problem associated with a trust or an estate plan, they may have been my client for 20 years, but I'm probably going to work with an insurance professional and bring them in, or work with their existing insurance professional and want to take a second seat to that person because that person has more expertise in the area that the client is looking for direction in. The last 2 points are also very important. You don't want to overwhelm the client with too many advisors. In complex situations, consider prioritizing the planning process and do things in phases. So we might be talking about a very complex estate plan that there are going to be insurance issues, there are going to be asset transfers, there are going to be multiple family partnerships and trusts, and there's going to be a philanthropic part of it. And that can overwhelm a client if you're trying to do everything at one point. So as a team, try to prioritize where you need to work first, and when that part of the planning is finished, go on to the next part. I think the client will better understand what is being done if it's broken out into phases. And also be careful. Too many advisors could cause the client to perceive a high cost for planning. And that's always a risk that is there when there are too many advisors involved. So let's now go to the process. And this is pretty straightforward, but I'd like to go over it. First, you have the initial meeting with the client. And at this initial meeting, and it may take more than one meeting, all the advisors need to fully understand the situation. What is the client's situation? And believe me, when you ask the client, what are you thinking about? What are your aspirations? How do you envision your business to turn out 5 and 10 years from now? What do you want to accomplish? They will tell you. and this could take more than one meeting to understand, because as they speak, the group is going to have a lot of questions. You also want to assign responsibilities and establish a timeline. Once the group understands what the client wants to accomplish, we need to assign responsibilities to each member of the team and establish a timeline for them to do their research, do their number crunching, whatever it is, come up with a game plan for them to fit their piece of the puzzle into the entire picture, into the entire puzzle. And as a team, you want to create a comprehensive plan. So after you've had your first meeting, everyone goes back, knows what they need to do. The team needs to meet to put together a comprehensive plan for the client and maybe narrow down the possibilities, because again, you don't want to overwhelm the client with 30 different possibilities or 30 different paths to take. Come up with the few that are best suited for the client, that the client will understand and that will work best for the client. And this will take some regular interaction among the advisors. But coming up with a comprehensive plan or just a few alternatives is the second step. The third step is presenting the plan to the client. And this plan, after it's presented to the client, may need to be revised, because between the time that you first met with the client and that you present the plan to the client may have changed their mind on who they want to inherit, or how much they want to inherit, or how much they wanted to give to charity or not to give to charity, or they maybe wanted to change the names of the charities that they want to leave some of their estate to. So they may have changed their mind. Or as you're going through the plan with the client might say, well, that's not really now what I think I want to do based on what you're saying. And again, you may need to refine your plan based on this initial meeting and concerns that have been raised by the client. After you've gone through all that process, it's important to assist the client with executing the plan. Just handing the client the plan and thinking that they're going to execute it themselves, it may not happen. A good example of this is creating a revocable trust for the client. You hand that trust to the client, it's going to end up on the shelf collecting dust. You may need to assist your client in transferring title of assets from their own name into that trust to make it work. And it's also very important to monitor and amend the plan as needed. Things change with the client. I suggest every 5 years or so, or when the client goes through a life cycle change, such as retirement, maybe the death of a spouse, or they've now sold their business, monitor the plan. Make sure that it's going as anticipated. Have circumstances changed where the plan needs to be changed. And one or more of the professionals on the team need to take responsibility for this monitoring over the course of the next several years after the plan has been set in motion. So this is what I think a high-level team looks like, how it benefits the client, and how it benefits the advisors. If you have any questions about high-level teaming or want more detail on putting a plan together and bringing a team together, please don't hesitate to give us a call here at Belfin Lyons and Schumann. We're here to answer your questions. Thank you and have a good day.